everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you today to talk about communicating with empathy for stronger communities. So before we begin, I'd like to invite you to have a moment of reflection with me. I'd like you to think about the last time you really opened up to someone else around something challenging. Maybe it was a tough project that you were working to define, or maybe you were just tired of living through a pandemic. And in opening up, did you feel genuinely listened to and understood? And what did that feel like? So, a little bit about me. I am a full time community organizer for the WordPress open source project. And one thing I am always mindful of is where and when I can communicate with empathy. I really love when people can offer feedback or share with me how they are feeling about something, because that's a gift and a big show of trust, especially if what a member is expressing is something that is more challenging or distressing or even an angry sentiment. And in those moments, as a community professional, how we respond can make or break those relationships. So turning to empathy is my preferred way of truly connecting with that member because I care about them. So today we're going to talk about some ways to express empathy in our communication and how that actually strengthens the communities that we serve. And when I talk about empathy, I'm working with a pretty simple definition, being the ability to understand and share in the feelings of another person. Another way of thinking about this is having the ability to take on the perspective of another person. Empathy is going to ask us to wonder what it would be like to walk in someone else's shoes. One really important thing to keep in mind here is that there is a difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is going to be when we feel concern for other people and wish them to be happier or healthier or for their situation to improve in some way. Empathy, however, is a step beyond sympathy and is really important for driving engagement. Empathy is important for us as community professionals because it actually brings us closer to our community members. And being able to actively share in a community member's feelings unlocks some pretty incredible sentiments. In fully connecting with our members' feelings, especially those most vulnerable and difficult feelings, we actually make our communities a safer and more welcoming place. Part of responding with empathy is reserving your own judgment. So when you treat a member with empathy, they might actually feel like, hey, yeah, you really get me. You are here with me. You're not judging me for what I'm sharing. I belong here. And members who express themselves and receive empathy are going to feel supported and seen and heard and understood, less alone, and maybe even validated. And this results in a higher sense of psychological safety. Empathy being a driver of engagement, if we regularly communicate with empathy, we're empowering members to express themselves, even with the most challenging things. And they'll actually end up expressing themselves in more collaborative ways longer term. If you have a relationship with someone who regularly responds to you with empathy, the chances that you go into a conversation with them less defensively or not out of anger is pretty high. And all of this is going to motivate your members to continually stay involved in your community. They'll see that this is a great community where they can be themselves, wholly human, and that it's a community that values treating each other with kindness and respect. All of which is great, right? So if you are a community professional like me, you look at this list and you're like, yes, I want one of each, I want all of this. But walking in someone else's shoes, displaying empathy can be really hard to do. It takes a lot of awareness to set aside our own judgment. And we have different frames of reference. There's no one size fits all shoe. And Feelings are messy and hard to process, let alone express. It can feel really uncomfortable, maybe even vulnerable for you to share in someone else's difficult feelings. So, let's talk about one way to demonstrate empathy through your communication, through what is called active or reflective listening. Active or reflective listening asks you to give undivided attention to who you are speaking with. It's a great way to truly connect with a community member, which, again, sounds great, right? Well, it's a little tricky. When we listen or when we read text, what are we really doing? In our work, there are two really common ways that people tend to listen that, spoiler, isn't actually really listening. The first thing that we do is that we listen to respond. As we are listening, we're not really thinking about what is being said, and rather we're focused on what we need to say and end up not really hearing what is being said to us. Might look something like this. I spent all night writing this proposal, but it's finally done. Great. I was waiting for that. Can you tackle this next proposal now? I imagine this to be between two well-intentioned, but just way too busy people. And it feels a little selfish, yeah? For some people, it might also be kind of a minor thing. So something we'll just kind of brush off and go complain to a friend about later. But if we continue in this pattern of focusing on just communicating what needs to get done or said, instead of really listening, those annoyances do really add up. The other way we listen is to fix a problem. I personally really like problem solving, so this is one I actively have to watch out for in my communication patterns. And in this case, we only end up focusing on finding solutions, and we can easily miss acknowledging the problem itself or the underlying feelings. Kind of looks like this. I worked really hard on this project, and no one cared. Oops, we'll add your name to the list of contributors. This is a classic case of, oh no, let me fix that. And sometimes maybe you do need that, but frequently, if your responses are just a series of fixes, you might really be missing some key underlying feelings or even problems that your community members are trying to get you to see. In some cases, these communication patterns of listening to respond or listening to fix a problem might help move things forward. But imagine if the people expressing themselves were really angry or upset in these cases. How do you think they would feel? Probably, at the very least, not listened to. And so this is where active or reflective listening can be an immediately actionable and handy tool to help us really listen and communicate with empathy. There are a few elements involved in active listening. The first is that instead of listening to respond or to solve a problem, I'm going to ask you to practice listening for understanding and connection. Really give the person you're speaking with your full attention. What are they expressing to you? Next, I'm going to ask you to turn on your curiosity about what your member is experiencing. What isn't being said? And how does that add to your understanding of the situation? What more do you want to know? If you can see them, what does their body language tell you? And lastly, I'm going to ask you to take note of some of the key words that are being said that really capture what this member is expressing. These could be phrases that reflect the situation, or adjectives that describe their feelings, or verbs that relate actions. Anything that gives you more clues to add to your understanding. So, what's incredibly powerful about active listening is that now we can create empathetic responses by reflecting those keywords that demonstrate our understanding and curiosity in our own words. We're going to go through an example of how to do all of this shortly, but this act of listening for understanding and curiosity in keywords is really important for three reasons. First, it just shows that you were listening. You were able to capture what was said. You really paid attention to this member when they needed you to listen. And even if you didn't fully understand, you were with them there in that moment. And it might feel a little strange at first, but reflecting keywords in our own terms actually helps to check our understanding of what the person is trying to share. And it gives them an opportunity to clarify or add more information. It is okay if we get it wrong because feelings are hard. It is actually better to get that clarity and move forward with a shared understanding. Which leads to the third and most important reason to practice active listening. It's because it builds rapport. It allows the person to feel heard and understood, maybe even validated. We show members that we are there with them in the moment and that we want to understand what they are going through. We really connect with them and express that through empathy in our communication. So, next slide. Let's examine a situation where we can apply some active listening. So I've got an example where a community member is sharing something really difficult that they experienced in our community. And we're going to walk through two possible responses, one with active listening and one without. I'm going to warn you that these are going to be some text-heavy slides, but I'm going to drop a link into the chat here. It's also available on, I've tweeted it out, but this is a worksheet that includes the example, so you can just copy that sheet and read it on your own. And it also includes a few other examples that you can work through to create your own empathetic responses. But here's our example for today. I've been a part of this community for years, but have continually faced sexist comments about women. At a recent event, John told my client a really sexist joke about women business owners, and everyone laughed. It was so inappropriate, and I'm embarrassed and angry. So, deep breath. Like when you read this, it's unfortunately common in many communities, and it sucks, right? It is devastating when a member experiences something like this. Now, many communities will have a reporting process that this person could go through, which is excellent and could be a really important thing for this person to do. So, by that logic, a community professional could respond with, "I am so sorry that happened to you. John shouldn't have done that. Can you please fill out this code of conduct report for us?" Let's break that down a little bit. So this is the response without active listening, and it sure does follow our community guidelines. But in this case, we really listened to solve a problem, and we didn't fully acknowledge what had happened. "I'm sorry that happened to you. John shouldn't have done that," is sympathy, not empathy. And it actually ends up keeping a distance between you and your community member, almost like, "Oh, it's a shame that that happened." We're solving the problem by asking them to fill out the code of conduct report. And while that probably is a very important step, bringing it up right away could cause this person to feel like you're just pushing their problem somewhere else. It could make them feel like they are part of a process instead of a valued member of the community. So why do they even need to come to you in the first place? So let's take a step back and apply some active listening. And we're going to listen for understanding and with curiosity and for some keywords, and we're going to put together a different response. So this time, as I'm reading this, I've highlighted a few keywords that stand out to me. I've been a part of this community for years, but have continually faced sexist comments about women. At a recent event, John told my client a really sexist joke about women business owners, and everyone laughed. It was so inappropriate. I'm so embarrassed and angry. So listening for understanding leads us to see that this is an ongoing problem for this person, and that what John said was just another thing on a pile of unpleasant comments that became really personal with a client involved. That everyone laughed might have made them feel alone or even insecure in that moment, and they really need someone to see what they are going through. This is a problem that has been simmering for a long time, and this person is just fed up. That's a lot to respond to, but it's all really good information that we need to hold on to for the conversation ahead. So a first empathetic response could look like this. Thank you for sharing this with me. I'm hearing that you've had to deal with sexist behavior for years, and what John said to your client was really repulsive. It makes a lot of sense that you would feel mortified and furious. Can you tell me more about what happened? We've changed our response entirely. So notice that in my reflective listening, I'm not saying everything back word for word. That would feel pretty awkward and redundant. However, I'm using those keywords and I'm reflecting back some important points of what I am hearing in my own words. I'm checking my understanding with "I'm hearing that," so that I give this member an opportunity to confirm what I heard, to correct me, or to give me more information. I'm putting myself in their shoes, and yeah, if I were them in this situation, I would also be embarrassed and angry. So I can validate that with something like, "It makes a lot of sense that you are feeling this way." And I'm turning on my curiosity and inviting more conversation by asking for more details about what happened. So by the time I do suggest that they submit a code of conduct report, I might actually be able to better guide them in how to do so. So through active listening, I've demonstrated that what my community member is going through is important to me, that they matter to me, and I've built trust and rapport and a stronger relationship with this community member. Imagine if we extended that to all of our community members and what that would mean for our communities. So this brings us to the end of my talk on communicating with empathy. I know that this was a lot of content I squeezed in, so to make this a little bit more interactive and to give you some more practice, please do visit my Twitter. I've got a post to accompany this talk and a worksheet that you can work through with this and a few other exercises. And as you're going through that, if you do have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you. So thank you so much for being here with me today. And yeah, I'd love to tackle some questions now.
Honestly, Angela, I echo what Thomas has just wrote. This is so good. This was such a nice, sort of relaxing, soothing, and thought-provoking experience at the end of a busy day. Obviously, with all that community stuff going on, sometimes we just sort of fail to stop and think about these things. So. I'm also, I second Isaac's thoughts. Anyone else thinking this is the cure to the world's problems? Yes, it's, if you stop and think, we can always, sort of, by thinking the way that you've suggested, we can solve a lot of problems. Maybe not the world's problems, but certainly a lot of problems. And community and harmony between people is the way forward. So thank you very much for that. So let's tackle some of the questions. So Thomas is asking, How can I encourage buy-in on this communication style with my other team members?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, having team members communicate empathetically towards your community is a great way to model that behavior for the rest of your community, right? Thomas, I'm assuming that you are also a community organizer, but please let me know if that is incorrect. I think talking about the benefits that it brings to your team could be one way to help motivate people get there. And I think focusing on how much clarity it brings and how much it adds to your team's psychological safety and well-being. I mean, how can you go wrong with having good communication, right?
So we have one more question from Isaac. How do you build a habit of reflection into community practices coming from a B2B SaaS angle, which is probably a very, very busy, let's say, line of activity, so to speak. So what do you say, Angela?
Well, how do I build a habit of reflection into community practices? I think it's going to vary from community to community, and I'd actually end up reflecting the question on you a little bit. What do you think would help your community regularly think about their practices, and how can you gather that feedback and really incorporate it into what it is that you do? Um, for the WordPress community, I can share a little bit of my experience there. We're an open source community, and so we spend a lot of time working transparently and openly. And so communicating with empathy is a big part of what we do um, in order to build software. And our community deputies, they are this wonderful group of people who understand how our community works. We regularly talk with them and bring them into our practices. And when they raise flags to us, it's important that we all acknowledge and hear that, and we talk about it. You'd think that maybe it slows things down a little bit, but I can promise you that on the WordPress community team, we have a lot of projects going on right now that are going very, very quickly. So.
Fantastic. So thank you for these answers. And as much as, I'd love to, go on. Yeah, we have a comment. Thank you for sharing a practical formula. Yes, thank you. And I am sure this works for an engineering team too. So if you have any comments to add on that one.
Oh, yes, I would strongly recommend communicating with empathy for all teams.
Indeed, indeed. One thing that we can all do better as humanity all around the world. Certainly, empathy. Focusing on that pays a lot of dividends. Angela, this has been one of the best sessions that I've attended ever. So it's been really, really cool, and it looks like everyone's been feeling similarly. So. I'd love to, go on, but we just have another session, and be sure to stop by at the photo booth and all the other things around the dotted around the Bevy dashboard that you see. So, Angela, thank you very much, and we hope to see you in future events as well. And thanks for your time. Really, really appreciate everything that you have shared.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Have fun, everyone.